Yes, sir. Good morning. We can continue the lesson, The Rattrap by Selma Lagerlöf. Page number 35, you can take that. Then it was late in December. So it was late in December, and darkness was already descending over the forest. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. Finally, he saw no way out, and he sank down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound, a hard, regular thumping. So there was no doubt as to what that was. He raised himself immediately. Those were the hammer strokes from an iron mill, he thought, and there must be people nearby. Then he summoned all the strength, got up and staggered in the direction of the sound. Ramjo Ironworks, and which are now closed down, were not so long ago a large plant with smelter, rolling mill, and forge. The summertime long lines of heavily loaded barges and scows slid down the canal, which led to a large inland lake, and in the wintertime the roads near the mill were black from all the coal dust which sifted down from the big charcoal plants. So during one of the long dark evenings, just before Christmas, the master smith and his helper sat in the dark forge near the furnace waiting for the raw material, pig iron. So pig iron in the sense a raw iron which had been put in the fire to be ready to put on the anvil, that means the particular structure. And every now and then one of them got up to stir the glowing mass with a long iron bar, returning in a few moments, dripping with the perspirations, with sweating, though as was the custom, that was the custom, and of course, what was the dress code. And he wore nothing but a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. This was the dress code when he was, near to the furnace. So all the time there were many sounds to be heard in the forge. We can also get. So when we are crossing, when we are coming across, or when we are crossing the ironwork mill, the big bellows groaned, and of course, and the burning coal cracked. That we can also assume, we can also imagine, and the fire boy shovel, it is like pouring light, and of course throwing. So here the fire boy shovel threw that particular material. He also was working with that and shovel charcoal into the mouth of the furnace. That means mouth of the furnace with a great deal of clatter. You know what is a mini clatter? Whenever he was doing that, sound coming. So here clatter sound comes like. So outside rode the waterfall, and the next then outside you can also see that when you are visiting waterfall, and the sharp north wind whipped the rain against the brick tiled roof. This is what happened. This is what the climate. This is what the atmosphere. And it was probably on account of all this noise that the blacksmith did not notice that a man had opened the gate and entered the forge until he stood close up to the furnace. And here he was, the narrator was giving that. It was probably on account of all this noise. So that's why here the master smith and of course the helper of master smith, they didn't listen to that. That means they didn't show their attendance. Sorry, they didn't show their attention. Someone came inside, and of course without their notice, and of course he also asked permission. So that's why it was probably on account of all this noise that the blacksmith did not notice that a man had opened the gate and entered the forge until he stood close up to the furnace. He came close and of course asked permission. Surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabonds without any better shelter for the night to be attracted to the forge by the glow of light which escaped through the sooty pans, and to come into warm themselves in front of the fire. You understand that while during summer, sorry, during winter, and of course especially it was late in December. So you can also the end of the December month. That means 21 and 22, 23, 24, 25. Because Christmas Eve, we are going to have that experience of Christmas Eve, and of course Christmas Day celebration. So here late in December. So surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabonds. Poor vagabonds like the Rattrap seller were looking at that, and of course he was suffering a lot. He wanted to get a shelter, so that's why he had something hope. That's why he also, without asking permission, he came inside, and while looking at the furnace, that something he could also warm himself, like that's why he came. So surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabond. That means that was there, something. They have their attitude always. They whatever they will just go and ask, and they go and of course get whatever it is. So surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabond. That means without any better shelter for the night to be attracted to the forge. So here, while looking at that, okay, this time and this day, and I can also get shelter. I can also stay here. I can also sleep today tonight. Then I can leave. This is what he thought that. That's why here for common. This is for common for vagabonds without any better shelter for the night to be attracted to the forge by the glow of light, attracting that light, something we can get the warmth. So here glow of the light which escaped through the sooty pans. You can also underline the word here. The glass pans covered with the smoky dust, which is providing that, reducing something, removing that. Sooty pans here escape through the sooty pans and to come in to warm themselves. So we also in the winter season might have seen that, some of the children and of course even the youngsters, even the middle-aged fellows or even old people also, they will just prepare something and even fire also, and they will sit around like that and they will also warm themselves. They need something, they need some warmth, and of course they will also refresh. So that's why here he was very happy, and to come into the warm, they come into warm themselves in front of the fire. This is what happened. So blacksmith glanced only casually and indifferently at the intruder. He looked the way people of his type usually did, with a long beard, dirty and of course ragged, and with a bunch of rat traps jangling on his chest. So when he came inside and asked, just he came and of course in front of them and showed himself. So while looking and of course had a glance, the blacksmith glanced only casually. Something, those who are higher authorities, those who are, for an example, the supervisor or the manager in a company, or while looking at the employees, how they will behave. So likewise here, because he was the blacksmith and of course master smith, so he had a position, and of course he was a rich man. That's why the blacksmith glanced only casually and indifferently at the intruder, in the sense, he didn't consider he was a human being. That's why intruder, underlying the word, what is the meaning underlying intruder? Intruder means that, that the person who intruded. So here the person, you can write the Rattrap seller. He looked the way people of his type usually did, with a long beard. So of course, even while looking at the beggar, even while looking at Rattrap seller with the dress code, with a long beard, dirty, ragged, that means torn, and with a bunch of rat traps dangling on his chest. How will we look? We will also, we don't have that interest. We will not show our sympathy and empathy, or we don't have happiness. We don't have any happiness, something, we will not show that while looking at a beggar. He is coming inside, means, without asking permission. Just, even he didn't knock your door, he came inside and asking the Amma, what will you do that? And you cannot even accept that. That's why here he also just looked. He looked the way people are this type looking. So here even the beggar also. Beggar, when he glanced, the blacksmith glanced only casually and indifferently at the intruder. And here even here we are taking that he looked. We are taking that even the beggar also, even the Rattrap seller also, he looked the way people of his type usually did, with a long beard. So something, it is like, showing sympathy, and he was unable to speak anything, and of course he created something. He wanted to create something. That means, sympathy, and of course the pathetic situation he wanted to create. That's why some consideration. So he looked the way people of his type usually did, and of course with his long beard and dirty dress code, ragged, and with a bunch of rat traps dangling on his chest. Dangling, underline the word. Dangling means here we are taking that hanging down on his chest. So two of their activities are, we are just taking that. First one is the blacksmith glanced, and then second one is the rat trap seller looked, and he was also looking like baking like. So that's why with this beard, with this dirty rags, and of course bunch of rat traps dangling on the stairs. Two of them, two, the differentiation we can also take that. He asked permission to stay, and of course he asked permission to stay, and the master blacksmith nodded a hearty consent without honoring him with a single word. You understand? So with that, that was a situation of work, and he was asking. So when he was asking permission, when he asked permission to stay, of course, that tonight or that particular night, and the master blacksmith, he nodded, underline the word. What is the meaning nodded? You know what is the meaning nodded? And of course, showing some gesture, and of course accepted that a hearty consent. Have a close to bracket. Hearty consent means maybe it is not very formal and maybe arrogant. Maybe arrogant means while looking at that, when we don't have interest, we will also show something. We don't like, but anyhow we don't have any other choice, so that we are accepting, right? So hearty consent, and the consent means agreement or acceptance. Hearty means maybe arrogant, not very formal, and nodded a hearty consent means without speaking anything, without considering anything. Okay, that means that person including, and of course that's why without asking permission he entered into the forge. Okay, he's asking that, but he was unable to show his depression, so that he also accepted. That means nodded. Okay, okay, like that. He just nodded a hearty consent without honoring him with a single word. He didn't speak anything when he asked, because already he without his permission he entered. So that's why, and he never considered he was a human being. That's why even without honoring, so you just imagine that someone comes to our house. How will we? We will also speak something, maybe welcoming, showing hospitality, doing some honoring, some honor them with some words like. But he didn't use anything without honoring him with a single word. Then the tram, already told you, tram means narrowed in Tamil, right? The tram means vagabond or rattrap seller or rattrap peddler. The tram did not say anything. For that honor, he didn't come, right? So he came only for the so he came only for the shelter tonight, that particular night. That's why he also was very happy with that, because he nodded, he accepted, had given a hearty consent, the master blacksmith. So the tramp did not say anything either, and of course he also kept quiet. And he had not come there to talk, but only to warm himself and sleep. You understand? He needed some, of course, protection, some shelter, and of course that night he will sleep. The next day he will also wander. He will also go somewhere. Then he can also use that 30 kroner and he get the survival. He can whatever he wanted, he can also buy, he can also live. This is what is planned. So that's why the tramp did not say anything either, and he had not come there to talk with this master blacksmith or anyone of us. So he is there to talk, but only to warm himself and sleep. And in those days, the Ramjo iron mill was owned by a very prominent iron master. You underline the word iron master, very prominent. Prominent, underline the word, you know what is the meaning, very famous. Iron master, underline the word owner, you write iron master here, owner. But master blacksmith, an assistant of master blacksmith. And now we are introducing another character. In those days, the Ramjo iron mill was owned. You know what is the meaning owned? Owned by a very prominent, very famous iron master. Iron master, you write the owner of the iron work, and whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the market. Underline the word and I have a closed bracket. To ship out in the sense, give a shape. You write ship out means you write shape out, S-H-A-P, shape out, or means iron materials, providing. You can also write providing iron materials to the market. So he watched, and of course here, whose greatest ambition, that means the owner of the iron mill, iron work, that means the owner, whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the market, means that iron materials to the market. And he watched both night and day to see that the work was done as well as possible. That means he was prominent. He was a very prominent. That's why he was very generous. So whenever he comes, that means for his rounds, whenever he visits the ironwork, and of course he watched both night and day to see that the work was done as well as possible. So best products he was just wanted to produce. You understand that? So that's why he had a system, and of course he everything systematically arranged. Of course he came for research, and he also counsel, or we can go for advice and order, and in a systematic way he just ran. Of course we can take that he ran the ironwork. So and at this very moment he also came, and at this very moment he came into the forge on one of his nightly rounds of inspection. You understand? Already there was a blacksmith, an assistant of blacksmith. They also had given a hearty consent, and by that the peddler came inside and started to sleep. So started to do that. That means whatever he wanted, bomb and of course sleep. So here, when he came, the ironmaster, when he came for this nightly rounds of inspection, what is the meaning? Visiting. You can also underline the word nightly rounds of inspection means visiting. Simply you can write that visiting. And what was his aim? Whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the markets, good iron materials to the markets, to the people, right? So he worked both night and day. That means, he worked, of course, day and night to produce. Understand that? So when he came into the forge on one of his nightly rounds of inspection. Naturally, the first thing he saw was the tall ragamuffin who had eased his way so close to the furnace that steam rose from his wet rags. The ironmaster did not follow the example of the blacksmith, who had hardly deigned to look at the stranger. He walked close up to him, looked him over very carefully, then tore off his slouch hat to get a better view of his face. But of course, it is you, Nils Wolof. He said, "How you do? How you look? How you do look?" You understand that naturally came. So here, ragamuffin, underline the ragamuffin. That means you write that. So naturally, the first thing he saw was unlike. You can underline the word. That means first naturally the first thing he saw was the tall ragamuffin. You underline the word. That means he saw was the tall. That means unlike the blacksmith, he just looked. So how he had given his hearty consent, not like that. Here he just came very closer, very close, and of course very he came very closer and had a very good look. That means recognizing the people. So here, that's why here the tall, and of course we are just describing his cloth, dress code. So here, what was his dress code? So naturally, the first thing he saw was the tall ragamuffin who had eased his way so close to the furnace. So he was wearing a dress code, and that's why he came very closer to the even furnace and even very close to the peddler. Then that's why here to the furnace and steam rose. You know what is the meaning? Steam rose, sweating rose. So here from his wet rags. So here wet rags, dress code, and everything. While looking at the peddler, he was also becoming something threatened, like, and of course, while seeing higher authority, the ironmaster did not follow the example of the blacksmith. So how the blacksmith had a glance. You understand that he didn't watch, he didn't even check very properly the peddler, and of course he showing his hearty concern. So he never considered the peddler was a human being. So whatever he insisted to the ironmaster was the owner, and of course he was the peddler. He just asked the shelter tonight. Likewise, whatever he asked, the ironmaster didn't follow. The ironmaster did not follow the example of the blacksmith, and of course his helper, who had hardly deigned. Underline the word deigned means here maybe accept or consent, and of course showed low indignity. You know what is the meaning? Low indignity means no respect, and of course who had hardly deigned showed dignity to look at the stranger. That's why they didn't even check who was he, and who was he, and of course what he had. They didn't check. But here he came. He walked very close up to him and looked him very carefully. The ironmaster, because he was the owner. So not like others, not like the employees, even the master blacksmith and his helper, how they had a glance and identified who was he. But as the leader or as the owner of the ironwork, he came very close, he walked close up to him, and he looked him over very carefully, then tore off. That means remove. You can also underline the word. He removed of his slouch hat. Underline the word here. Slouch hat to get a better view of his face. You understand that? He also just removed. He also removed is something battered. We are saying battered means totally torn, and of course torn clothes, like. So here the tore of removed his clothes he had to get a better view of his. After seeing that, he just he shouted, But of course, it is you, Nils Olaf. Underline the word a character. Nils Olaf is a character. He said, "How you do look." Something he misunderstood. Something he misunderstood or he mistook. While looking at it, we will also, because of his dress code, because of his appearance, he also mistook him. So while looking very carefully, you understand there is an irony. There is an irony. He had a very careful look, but he mistook. He was his old friend like. That's why. But of course, it is you, Nils Olaf, and he was also pronouncing a name, and he had given him a name, Nils Olaf. He said, "How do you look?" So you are looking so different, strange, my dear. What happened to you? Like the Ironmaster was saying. The man with the rat traps had never before seen the Ironmaster at Ramjo and did not even know what was his name was. But he was telling that sometime we will also. We have come across too many comedy scenes like without identifying very properly, and we some of them committed. So likewise, when he also revealed something and shouted at them like, "Nils Olaf, this is you. So how do you look?" He was shouting like and sharing. The man with the rat trap seller had never before seen the Ironmaster at Ramjo and did not even know what was his name was. But it occurred to him that if the fine gentleman thought he was an old acquaintance, we are saying, but anyhow it has occurred to me because maybe it's a fate. You understand? Already he was totally tired. He exhausted, and of course he lost his even hope also. He submitted himself into in front of death, but at last he got an opportunity, heard the sound of hammer stroke, so that he collected and of course summoned all the strength with the hope of survival. He came to the Ramjo Ironwork, and he without getting permission he entered as a beggar, and of course he came in front of the master smith and got party consent. He started to sleep. This is a fine time. Something was something occurred for him. But here it occurred to him that if the fine gentleman, underline the word, the fine gentleman was the owner of the ironwork, or we can go for iron master. The fine gentleman iron master thought he was an old acquaintance. You know what is the meaning? Old acquaintance means that maybe the relationship or his friend, of course, maybe his cousin or whatever it is. So here we are taking the relationship. Familiar with acquaintance, familiar with. He was an old acquaintance means already he had experience with that particular man. He might perhaps throw a couple of kroner. He thought that. So he might perhaps throw him a couple of kroner and I can run. He thought that he can also throw the kroner, that means money. Therefore, he did not want to undeceive him at all once. Underline the word undeceive, right? Not reject or deny. You know what is the meaning? Deny means when someone is with hope saying that or asking us agree, we don't want to deny. Deny means disagree with that. So therefore he did not want to disagree him, reject him at all once, and he thought that I can also throw a couple of kroner note, then I can escape. And he is just going to disturb. He's going to give me struggle. This is what the butler understood when he was saying that he was Nils Olaf, his old acquaintance. Yes, God knows things have gone downhill with me, he said. Something, he wanted to manage the situation when he was saying that, Nils Olaf, how do you look like? You understand? That was the situation. So he identified, and of course he managed. Here the Rattrap seller managed how he was managing, like, yes, God knows things have gone downhill with me. You know what is the meaning. So God knows, only God knows things have gone downhill. That means something collapsed, and of course, getting something not improvement like, and of course, so God knows things have gone downhill with me. So everything in the hands of the God. This is not. This is my fate like. That's why I have changed. I have been getting changes like. So here he said, okay, you should not have resigned from the regiment. Underline the word regiment means maybe that particular unit, particular force, maybe in the group, maybe in the system. And here the ironmaster was patting in the sense, supporting. You should not have resigned. Underline the word. What is the meaning resigned? What is the meaning resigned from the regiment means that committee or the force or the unit or the group or the particular job. and they had a team, and of course they worked together in a team. That's why he was saying that you should not have resigned from the regiment, said the ironmaster. That was a mistake. That's why now you are looking like a beggar, and of course you lost your charm and everything. So I feel sorry for you. And here he was saying that that was a mistake. If only I had still been in the service at the time, it never would have happened. If I was there, something he was saying that if I something in my present you cannot do that. But anyhow, when I came, you also took this decision. Now you are looking like a peddler, looking like a vagabond, looking like a beggar. And he was also patting. So you should have not resigned from the regiment, said the ironmaster. That was a mistake. If only I had still been there in the service at that time, it never would have happened. Well, now of course you will come home with me. And here the ironmaster was requesting the peddler to come home. So what was the condition? He was welcoming. He was just urging him. So here the Rattrap seller or the beggars or vagabond situation was in a critical stage. He wanted to escape from the people, but anyhow that was his bait. 30 krona in his pocket. That's why he was being stimulated. So he was, and he didn't have any words to discuss with the ironmaster and reject them. Remaining we will discuss in the next class.